Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We're gonna continue. Ooh, I felt like the whole computer just moved. I think it's because I hit my cord. Um, Yikes! So sorry about all that. Anyway, let's talk about our feeling good and our positive mindsets. We talked about being yourself and perfectly Norman. We talked about following your dreams and little Joe Chickapig. Yesterday, although I didn't post this to Class Dojo, I put it in the classrooms that we were dealing with. I'll put it in today in Class Dojo. I forgot to put it in the whole school one. This is Dream Big Little Scientist that we were looking at about following your dreams, and especially dreams in science. Like, what do you like to learn about? It's very interesting to me. And like I said yesterday, and I think you know this, I am very interested in space. So, one of my favorite books that I picked up this year, I know, can you believe I have a favorite book? I can't believe I have a favorite book, but this is Counting on Katherine. And it is a person named Katherine Johnson who's very important. And it's just going to teach us how Katherine Johnson saved Apollo 13. And that's one of the space missions. So just like tomorrow, which is going to be Saturday, the SpaceX Falcon 9 Dragon crew will try for a second time to take off from Florida and take a rocket up to the International Space Station. Now, they couldn't do it on Wednesday because of the weather. And it's not just the weather down in Florida. It's also the weather in and around the ocean, or like around Ireland. Because if something should happen and they go up and they start to take their flight up to the International Space Station, and something happens and they decide that they have got to come back, that this isn't working, they don't land in Florida. They land someplace else. So when the scientists and the astronauts and everybody's talking about going up into space, it's just not the weather down in Florida. So they're looking at the weather in many different places. So we'll have to watch the weather for tomorrow, and hopefully you'll get a chance to watch the Falcon 9 go up into space. So today we're going to read, though, Counting on Katherine, a favorite book of mine. And I know you've never heard me say that. Oh, and here it is. The author's name is Helaine Becker, and it's illustrated by Dow Phumiruk. I apologize if I said his name wrong. I love the end pages on this book. Let me show them to you. I had to take off the jacket, by the way. Even look at the cover without the jacket. You see all that math? Guess what Katherine Johnson does? She does mathematics. Isn't that cool? This is who she is. Or, unfortunately, was. She just passed away, I think in February. So I meant to write that. I don't know if I wrote down the date on this book because I actually was reading it at the time that it happened. No, I didn't write it down. So let's start. Ready? Katherine loved to count. She counted the steps to the road, the steps to the church, the number of dishes and spoons she washed in the bright white sink. And there she is, coming down, going to church, washing her dishes. The only things that Katherine couldn't count were the stars in the sky. Only a fool, she thought, would try that. Even so, the stars sparked her imagination. What was out there? Katherine yearned to know as much as she could about numbers, the universe, about everything. And there you see her looking out her window. So she yearned to know, which meant she really wanted to learn. How many of you guys really want to learn? Katherine's boundless, that means never ending, curiosity turned her into a star student. She was so bright, are you ready? She skipped 3 whole grades. She was catapulted right past her brother. He wasn't too happy about that. Look at, he's got his hands on his hips. Do you think he likes it that she's in school ahead of him and she's younger? Oh, and look at all the boys and girls are sitting there and the teacher, and she's up at the board doing the mathematics. By the time she turned 10, Katherine was ready for high school. Can you believe that? 10 years old? You're in like 5th grade at 10 years old. She's already going to high school. She's so smart. Back then, America was legally segregated by race. Her town's high school didn't admit black students of any age. Katherine burned with fury. She wanted more than anything to keep learning. There was still so much to know. Unfortunately for Katherine, she grew up in a time when there were different schools for different people. And it wasn't fair and it wasn't right. But she couldn't go to the high school because she was African American, she was black. And there wasn't a high school for her. But somebody comes to the rescue. Who is that? Count on me, Katherine's father told her. Here he is. So this is where they're going to live, and then they're going to go here. By working day and night, he earned enough money to move the family to a town with a black high school. So he knew how much Katherine wanted to learn, and he didn't want her to not be able to get that education. So he literally moved the entire family for Katherine. Katherine loved high school. Look at her there. She was good at every subject, but math was still her favorite. She dreamed of becoming a mathematician, a research mathematician, making discoveries about number patterns that are the foundations of our universe. Oh, and guess what she became? Can you see this? In those days, there were no jobs as research mathematicians for women. Professions most available for them were teaching and nursing. So Katherine became an elementary school teacher. She liked her job. She loved her students, but she never stopped dreaming about exploring numbers. So not only were there separate schools back then, but there were certain jobs for people. So women could have certain jobs. They couldn't do things like be a mathematician or a research mathematician. She just could be a teacher or a nurse. That's it. Do you think that's fair? I bet my girls are going, no, Mrs. Nielsen. That's because my girls are smart. Everybody's here smart. And there, okay. So in the 1950s, the U.S. government's National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, NACA, hired thousands of new employees. It even started hiring black women as mathematicians. Katherine heard about the mathematician jobs. Her heart raced with excitement. Perhaps her dream would come true after all. But when she applied for one of the positions, she was told they were already filled. Katherine had to wait a whole year until new spots opened up. Her patience paid off. She got the job. So now she's a mathematician, which was always her dream. A few years later, the Soviet Union sent a rocket ship into space, launching a space race with the United States. NACA was rolled into a new space agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or as we know it as NASA. Katherine found herself at the heart of America's space program. She worked as a computer. Electronic computers weren't widely used yet, calculating long series of numbers. All the computers were women. They were given the tasks that men thought were boring and unimportant. That didn't bother Katherine. She knew that without her contributions, a spaceship couldn't reach its destination nor safely return to Earth. So look at all these women. They were the first computers. That was before we had our little cell phones or the computer, the Chromebook that I'm using now. It was women. And they worked for NASA. And she knew she was doing wonderful things. Rockets could not take off and go to space without people like Katherine Johnson. And here's why. Are you ready? Sending a rocket ship into space is like throwing a ball into the air. At first, the force of the throw sends the ball up, 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 up. See how a little girl's throwing? Little young Katherine? Up, up, up. But as the energy runs out, the ball's path curves back towards the ground. Where it lands depends on what angle it was thrown and how high and how fast it flew. Because math is a kind of language, Katherine could ask those questions. How high would the rocket ship go? And how fast would it travel? Using numbers, and numbers would provide the all-important answer where it would land, which is just like I was talking today. Just like the weather, they're worried about the weather down in Florida, but they're also worried about that if the rocket ship should go up, if something happens and they decide, oh, we can't go to the International Space Station, they have to calculate where it's going to land. And the weather there has to be safe so that they can rescue the astronauts. So the weather is important here and there, where it takes off and where it lands. To find out, Katherine plotted the numbers she calculated on a graph. When she joined the points together, they formed a curved line. At one end of the line was the Earth at the time the rocket ship launched. At the other was where the Earth would be when the rocket ship landed. So remember, the Earth turns and it moves around the sun. So they have to figure out where it takes off and where it lands. One of my favorite pictures. Look at that. Katherine's reputation for accuracy and strong leadership skills, she was known for asking plenty of questions, got her promoted to Project Mercury, a new program designed to send the first American astronauts into space. Mercury's missions were going to be dangerous. So dangerous that even the Project Star astronaut, John Glenn, refused to fly unless Katherine okayed the numbers. You can count on me, she said. Glenn's spacecraft, Friendship 7, orbited the Earth 3 times, meaning 1, 2, 3, and then returned home safely. John Glenn became a national hero. But not our poor Katherine Johnson. I think she deserves some credit too. Now Katherine was promoted again. Now she was asked to calculate the flight paths for Project Apollo, the first flights to the moon. Count on me, she said. On July 20th, the Apollo 11 astronauts walked on the moon. Their feat was celebrated around the world. More triumphs followed. Apollo 12 rocketed to the moon in November 1969. Now, mind you, all these astronauts became famous, except Katherine Johnson, because she was just a computer, unfortunately. Apollo 13 launched on April 11th, 1970. But on the third day of Apollo 13's flight, the worst thing happened: an explosion in space. Could the crippled spaceship make it to the moon? If it didn't, would it be able to get back home to the Earth? The 3 astronauts on board were in grave peril. Commander Jim Lovell told Mission Control, "Houston, we have a problem." So the astronauts are up in space. Can they make it to the moon? If they make it to the moon, can they make it home? Who can help them? Somebody has got to figure this out. Somebody who's very smart with mathematics. Back on Earth, Katherine Johnson got a phone call. Her flight path would have to be done all over again and perfectly. It would be the toughest challenge of her life. Katherine told Mission Control, "You can count on me." She rolled up her sleeves, took a deep breath, and began doing the math. So now look, we're going to go around like this, and she's got to get them back. She worked hard and fast. A few hours later, Katherine's calculations were finished. The flight path to return home would take the ship around the far side of the moon. From there, the moon's gravity would act like a slingshot to zing the spaceship back to Earth. To get home, the crew of the Apollo 13 would have to follow Catherine's course exactly by burning off fuel at precise intervals. If the astronauts made a mistake, their ship would drift into space forever. So she's doing something that's never been done before. She told them what they needed to do, and they are going to go around to the far side of the moon and then use that gravity to shoot them back home. Katherine waited anxiously to hear the astronauts' report. Finally, it crackled over the loudspeakers. We've got it. Apollo 13 was still on track. So, just one quick thing. When they were on the far side of the moon, there was no radio contact. They couldn't talk to the people back on Earth because they were away from, because the moon was blocking all the transmissions. So they didn't know what was happening. Can you imagine how relieved Katherine Johnson felt when she knew her plan succeeded? Katherine Johnson had done it. She brought Apollo 13 home. She was no longer the kid who dreamed of what lay beyond the stars. Now she was a star herself. But still, people didn't know about her for a long time. So here is more about Katherine. So she was born in 1918. And she passed away this year right before her 103rd birthday. Can you believe that? So she always wanted to grow up to be a teacher. And when she started school, she went right into second grade. And then later on, she skipped from second grade all the way to fifth grade. So she did a lot of things in her life. And here's another drawing of her. She's very, very famous. And like I said, we really didn't know about Katherine Johnson until the last couple of years, unfortunately. And I think that she is somebody that we should all know about, boys and girls, because it's a story about following your dreams, working really, really, really hard, and doing what you love. Isn't that a wonderful story? And she saved people, and she did amazing things with her life. So this is also an adult book that I picked up when we went down to Texas. And this is about that. Failure is not an option. Mission control from Mercury to Apollo 13 and beyond. So Mrs. Nielsen loves that space stuff. So I hope you enjoyed Counting on Katherine. I hope it inspires you to learn about astronomy, the study of space, or maybe inspires you to become a great mathematician, study math and algebra and calculus and trigonometry and geometry and all those wonderful things. So keep that in mind this weekend, and watch for that space exploration rocket to go off, okay? See you later, alligators. After a while, crocodile. Love you. Bye.